And we're going to call the meeting to order because it seems like we finally have quorum. Minute keeper isn't here, so if maybe an executive or a counselor were to put themselves forward as someone who could take minutes, that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll add that into the agendas at some point. Yeah.
A motion to approve temporary minute keeper of Kira.
Sure. So I can do something that's put on. Does anyone want to second it? Okay. Is there any debate about this or any discussion that anyone wants to have? Okay, well in that case we're going to move straight to a vote to appoint Akira as minute keeper for the meeting. So all who approve this decision?
Oh.
7. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, so Akira is taking minutes. With the call to order, I can start the Native Solidarity Statement, which is that we would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Ganegaraga Nation is recognized as the custodian of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Tiohtià:ke, or Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with the Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. So you kind of jumped the gun on this, but I think you know that I am not your usual chair. So my name is Lana. The usual chair could not come today. There hasn't been put on the agenda of like approval of a chair. So we could have this later in the agenda, and like in the interim I can facilitate a conversation about it, but if someone wanted to pop up and do this, then...
Yeah, motion to approve Lana Galbraith as the interim chair.
Does anyone want to second this? Okay. Is there any discussion about it? Okay, so all who approve of this motion? Any against? And any abstentions? Okay, thank you. This makes it a lot easier. It was 6. No against, no abstentions. Okay, so the next point is a roll call. I've been informed that Zoe, Sammy, and James have requested excusal. I don't have their reasoning or anything like that. You had your hand up first.
Yeah, I would like to motion for Sophie also to be excused. She is on her way. She's just having a BOG meeting.
Okay, are people
Motion to omnibus the approval of all aforementioned parties.
do you want to omnibus this with the, because there hasn't been a, with Sophie?
So the motion of omnibus is for Sophie and the people that you mentioned.
Okay, does anyone want to second this?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion surrounding this? Anyone want to discuss it? No? Okay, so all approving the omnibus approval of their not being present. 1, 2, 6. Any against? And any abstentions? So 6-4. Okay. Another thing that I've been made aware of is that Abdullah officially resigned as a counselor. So this isn't something for approval, but it affects roll call. Is there anyone else that would like to add anything on roll call, or in terms of like knowing someone who's not going to be present or anything like that? Okay. So we'll move to the next point, which is approval of the agenda. Rory?
Yeah, I move to make a modification to the agenda. Can we add 2 new information points under 5?
So presentation and guest speakers?
Yep, as they're in, no, actually 7, new business informational. Sorry, my mistake.
Okay, what are your points?
They're both titled Cs.
So you want 2 different points that are called Cs?
My understanding is they have 2 different contexts, so.
I'll send you my version at the end too. Yeah.
Do you have access to the shared email or?
No.
Okay. There.
Okay. Does anyone want a second? Rory is asking to add something to the. Yes. Patrick. Okay. So Patrick seconds. Generally, we can keep adding things to have it approved at the end. Are people amenable to that kind of thing? Or, yeah, okay. Does anyone else have anything to add to the agenda? Yes.
Yes, I'd like to motion to strike item 5A, rights and responsibilities for nonprofit board of directors. That's going to be rescheduled to probably the next meeting. I would also like to add under new business substantive, I guess item E, our turn / students for consent culture.
Could you just repeat what number?
So it'd be 8E is an addition.
Okay.
Students for consent culture.
Okay. Does anyone want to second that? Rory?
Signed up.
Okay.
And are there any other points to add to the agenda?
Point of information. Actually, I remember last council, the chair asked us to write our student numbers on the sheet. Are we?
No?
That
was just to make sure that you were a registered student.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. Sorry about that.
Any other points to add to the agenda, Rory?
Yeah, can I pull from consent, or do you want to do that later?
Yeah, you can go from that.
I'd like to pull the first finance committee minutes. I'd like to pull the policy committee minutes. And I'd like to pull the chairperson's report. I understand that it's a different chairperson, but I'd still like to pull it for a question, and we may have to wait until Sophie gets here.
So all these would end up going directly into substantive because they'd have to get approved at the end of it.
Sure.
It was finance, chairperson, and policy.
Can we put them under informational instead? I don't think they're.
They would have to get
Well,
approved.
sure.
Don't you worry around, just fill it out.
Is there anything else to be added to the agenda?
Can you just do this for me? I'm reconciled.
Okay, then we can move to a vote to approve the agenda as an omnibus. Rory? Oh,
Yes, can we have in consent? I believe it's in consent. Can we add a new consent agenda to the consent culture, I believe, please?
I'm not quite sure I understand because the consent agenda isn't something that we talk about. The consent culture point is already on there. They're like as something that will be approved.
No, it's basically can we add another point to 8C? Basically, another 8C.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So adding 8C from the consent training completion.
Another one. Yes. Like 2 8C.
Okay. If it's to do with the same thing, it can be under the same point. The point is general enough, but if you like, I can add it afterwards to have something that is like a reminder, I guess.
Yeah, can we bring it down or something?
Yeah, sure.
Or I can add as a D or something.
Yeah, I'll put a D after consent training completion, another consent training completion. If it's a separate motion that really doesn't necessarily have to do with the other. Is there anything else to be added on the on the agenda? Sorry, and this would also include pulling things from the consent agenda. Okay, so would anyone like to move to yes,
Yeah,
Rory.
to approve the agenda as formulated.
Okay, anyone want to second that? Jared. Okay, all who approve the agenda as was stipulated, I can send it to someone so that they can send it out so that we can all follow together. So no one wants to approve the agenda? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Against? And abstentions? Oh yeah, there's no abstentions. Sorry about that. Okay, so the I guess it would be approval of the consent agenda because it wasn't necessarily an addenda to the approval of the agenda. Lori?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Would anyone like to second that? Yes.
A second.
What's your name again?
Marlène.
Marlène? Okay, all who want to approve the consent agenda as it was sent out, keeping in mind that things have been pulled out of the consent agenda in the last point. All those who want to approve the consent agenda? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All against? Okay, so the first point would be presentation and guest speakers, and we have C's, so Marcus and Olivia who are presenting. Go for it. Well, that's I had it under presentation and guest speakers.
I mean, new business informational is right after that anyway, right? So,
It's appointments, so.
yeah. All right. So should we just start?
Yeah, sure. I'm Olivia. I'm the project coordinator at the Sustainability Action Fund. I'm also a board member at Sustainable Concordia, and I'm a co-founder of Bang We with Solidarity Cooperative Cafe. I guess we'll introduce ourselves.
Yeah, I'm Marcus. I know a good number of people in the room. I'm an undergraduate here studying sociology. I've been involved in student politics and various groups on campus for quite a while now.
I'm also Olivia. I'm a fine arts student at Concordia, an undergrad. That's about it. I'm part of this project. So we're part of a project called Seize, which is and we're campaigning to create a solidarity economy incubator service on campus. So by incubator, we mean a business accelerator, and by solidarity economy, we mean cooperatives and some nonprofits. So we kind of see ourselves as a part of a global movement to transition to a post-capitalist society, and the way of doing that is by supporting enterprises that have democratic principles in their operations. And as a non-revenue generating service, that'll provide opportunities for students and young people to create entrepreneurial activities. We will need a fee levy to maintain ourselves.
So we're here as part of the regulation of the CSU to present the base question, the base referendum that we'll present in the petition that will soon be distributed. The base question is, do you agree to pay 35 cents per credit indexed to inflation in accordance with the Consumer Price Index of Canada towards the establishment of the Solidarity Economy Incubator as proposed by C's, effective fall 2019? So this is the first step to getting a fee levy for C's, and we're planning on giving more documentation to the CSU, past budgets and constitutions, and we're planning on meeting with other CSU board members and counselors, executive, so that our application is smooth, and we are excited for the future and working with this group.
Yeah, also I just, because it's necessary to view everything on paper. I emailed Lexi here a moment ago, so I think you uploaded it?
Yep, it's in the council Facebook page.
Yeah, so there's 2 separate points on this, which is why it's like they're both in that document though, so if the councilors want to take a look, and I guess we can answer questions about the first one, and upon completion of that point, move on to the second.
I'm sorry, point of information, what document?
Right, so I just messaged Lexi. It was emailed to the chair before, but Lana doesn't have access to that as the interim. So I think Lexi just posted it in the Facebook group.
Thank you.
It has the wording for both referendum questions. Yeah, on that note, this is just in compliance with CSU regulations. So 9.6.2 shows that any petition that that is planned on going to referendum has to be presented to CSU council just as a notification beforehand. So this is like the very first step before we even begin meeting with councilors and executives on like the establishment of this fee levy. Yeah.
Sorry, just a clarification. Are you planning on running a question for the by-elections or like?
Oh no, this is for the regular elections.
Okay, I was gonna say.
Yeah, that should have been clarified, sorry.
Fair.
So can we open it for question period possibly too? So does anyone have any questions for Steve?
How did you arrive at the 35-cent number?
So I can answer that. This was, we took into account a number of different factors. So the first being like what we consider our operational expenses to be. This is all going to be like presented on December 3rd with all the rest of the documentation. As I said, this is about collecting the petition that will be submitted on the 3rd. But mostly it's just sort of getting a rough idea based on our various stakeholders of what our operating expenses will be and how much that translates into based on the Concordia fee levy numbers, where 1 cent approximately equals $7,000 a year operational.
That didn't really answer my question.
So also part of our team is we have the executive director of Co-op Zone, and we also have a lot of experienced people who are doing consulting in business, specifically in cooperatives. And through their experience, we've decided that a budget of that size would be sufficient to be able to support the population.
Have you?
There was a hand.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go.
Just a quick question: how would you guys say this benefit to the students? So, like at large, though, like how would this really benefit to the student? Do you guys say like by increasing that going to really benefit the student though? Like in what kind of ways?
Yep. So the incubator is a service provider that will, firstly, there will be courses that will be offered, courses that we're currently running, and then to have lots of students enroll in them as well as community members. So we have a curriculum series running right now, which is Solidarity Economy 101. We have 20 active members that are enlisted in it, and they're going to be in it for the full duration of an 8-week course. So that's one of the things we hope to do, but also expand beyond the 101 into basically the 201 and the 301 so that we can run run overlapping curriculums to teach people, to immerse them in like the skill sets they need for the solidarity economy. So that's one way that students will benefit. The second way is that it'll offer networks into massive cooperative organizations and federations, as well as funders. So as part of this, we're partnering with large external organizations, which include Co-op Zone and the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation, who are both going to come on as support members, should this fee levy come through. So that will provide unprecedented opportunity for Concordia students, as something like this doesn't exist anywhere else in North America, according to research that we carried out the previous semester. And the third way is that potentially a fee of this size would allow us to allocate part of that towards funding for various student projects that they can get off the ground and potentially seek out other external funding bodies to match or grow that budget.
Have you considered alternative revenue streams as well? Because like I get that like a fee levy is like, it's a great opportunity, but like, to me, 35 cents seems like a lot, and we seem to always go to the fee levy when we want to do a project, and like, we also do have different levels of government, so have you considered other alternative revenue streams other than this, like, Concordia students?
Yes. Okay, so I can break that down, or we can, if you look at the document, you'll see that the next referendum question that we're going to be presenting addresses exactly that point. But yeah, there is other revenue sources. So the thing is, in order to keep it as like a grassroots solidarity movement, we believe that the most efficient way of doing that is through this fee levy system, after which we can diversify the funding portfolio so that we can bring in other stakeholders such as the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation, such as co-op zones, such as cooperative federations to try and like increase essentially the operating budget of the organization. But in order to do that, we would require a baseline. As for other groups, like the only other method of funding an incubator, because it's ultimately a service provider, it doesn't generate revenue, it's strictly service, is by attaching it to foundations, and like you would with any other NPO. And by doing so, you're effectively, by foundations we're talking about billionaires. And as a solidarity economy movement that's trying to create a system that moves away from billionaires and away from capitalist institutions, it's just like not very compatible with the mission statement that we're going for.
Additionally, also, something that has been discussed amongst our group is having a payback feature. So once we help enterprises launch, that they would eventually contribute once they started generating profits, but this would be much further down the line.
Margot. Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. We have like multiple fee levies at Concordia, which like dole out money for socially sustainable things. And they also come equipped with like coordinators who are like their whole job is to like support these initiatives and stuff like that. Why wouldn't you support initiatives that already exist rather than creating an entirely new fee levy?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess, do you know?
I feel like you're in a very good position to answer that question.
I'm involved in a lot of fee levies, and I guess specifically, like cooperatives are not addressed in any fee levy. Like the people who have been organizing, the co-founders of the Hive, the co-founders of Burritoville, which unfortunately failed, are all part of this team now. So, like those organizers, the people who are concerned about alternative economies aren't, like that's not the scope of those organizations. Does that answer the question?
Also, Olivia, I'm not sure if you heard in the introduction, is a coordinator at SAF. So like we are working with the fee levy community and with these groups.
Sophie?
Yeah, so part of being a fee levy and running for a fee levy as a non-CSU group is being fully operational for at least a year. What is the documented evidence that this organization has been fully operational for at least a year?
We are not required to present that until December 3rd. This is simply about the petition that will be circulating.
Okay, but just to be clear, non-CSU groups have to be operational for a year, and I understand you're not required to present that until December 3rd, but for a fee levy, if you don't have...
We have been loosely operational since 2015 when the first referendum question concerning a solidarity economy incubator was levied and passed.
Right, and there's documentation of at least a year of full operation?
Yes.
Okay.
John?
Yeah, so the first referendum question is worded clearly enough. That's great. The second one was specifically asking to reduce the silk fee levy in order to fund your levy without altering the total number of total amount of student fees that students pay. What relationship with the CSU do you anticipate having? Because what you're proposing is reducing this organization's levy to fund yourself, which is fine if you were like a CSU service or something like that. As an independent organization entirely, I have some concerns because it was like saying, I want to increase the CSU levy, we're going to take it from Queer Concordia. That wouldn't fly. So like, even though you're proposing to reduce the CSU's levy for your group, what relationship with the CSU do you hope to have?
I could answer that now, or we could wait until because that will be the second point.
Now would be great because you're collecting petition signatures for the question.
Okay. So yeah, as like a member of the CSU, and as our group consists of many members of the CSU, as well as like the people who we're getting involved through this process are members of the CSU, we see that the fee levy system is a fragile ecosystem, and therefore an increase of this size has to be planned in a responsible manner. And there is precedent from previous groups and previous campaigns of lowering the Silk Fund fee levy in order to accommodate an increase of an operation of one kind or another. And the most recent one being the DISH project, which involved a lowering of the Silk Fund fee levy by I think it was 2 cents, in order to fund the DISH project through increasing the CSU operating fee by an equivalent amount. So I think that, like, you know, speaking personally, because I was working on the DISH project referendum, like that sets a solid precedent. But in terms of like the way it would work with the CSU, the incubator itself would be a solidarity cooperative, and therefore there would be a support member seat for the CSU, because obviously it's necessary when creating like huge amounts of opportunities for Concordia students to be working with the ultimate representative body for undergraduates.
Thank you.
Peter?
Yes, so this question is really fun. I know you're fun. It's just that I don't really see how this. I know you guys are a free levy group. I just don't see how you guys will be able to benefit students large, because I've been sitting on council for 2 years now, and I know that FAD is usually student having trouble with our kind of free level group. So I just wanted to say, how do you guys want to bring this as student large, not only for a particular group, but for all students? How would you be able to get more accessible, or let more students get involved, not only in one particular department, but also in other departments as well?
So that as an incubator, what we do is we help other enterprises accelerate. So a way we would affect student at large is by having more operations like the Hive. So I'm sure you've been to the Hive, but that's a solidarity cooperative, and so we would have kind of a ripple effect through supporting groups become other organizations that would then help bolster student engagement.
And I think also SEAS fills in a gap of education that's at Concordia and probably across a lot of universities, and like providing information about social and solidarity economies throughout any, like I'm in fine arts, and it fills that gap of not understanding what other kinds of forms of economies that are sustainable exist. So I absolutely think it does that.
Also, while I was a student, I was trying to create this solidarity cooperative cafe that I'm a part of now, and we approached D3 because they're supposed to be a business incubator, and they were not able to provide us services because they do not specialize in solidarity economy.
Lauren?
The only comment I'm going to make is off of what John's mentioned, and it's just that maybe we should step back and be considering on a fundamental level, when we're adding a service, adding a value anywhere to the community, that should be coming with its own newly created revenue stream. The justification for taking money from Silk into funding a new initiative, I fundamentally disagree with. We have justification for a Silk fund, for having a Silk fund. We have justification for needing it. We have justification for funding it at a certain level. That justification is totally separate from, is there a new value-added service, operation, etc., that deserves money. I think that this game of like decreasing the Silk funding in order to increase the funding for a new initiative, regardless of whether it has value or not, it's not what I'm saying, needs to be looked at very separately. There's justification for funding Silk, there's justification for funding a new initiative. But I feel like it's an easy, I want to use a better word than cheat, but it's an easy cheat to apply for funding from an existing stream of money. But that money is earmarked for something else. So I'd like to encourage this initiative to look at a fee levy without taking it from Silk. I think that if there's value in the initiative, it should be justified in and of itself, and it shouldn't need to come from our existing reserve fund in order to do so. It should be able to stand on its own 2 feet, to say. That's all.
James?
Yeah, so one of the things, I've been listening to your presentation, one of the things that, one big concern I have right now is that essentially we are going to be funding an outside group that will then be giving money to other people that they suddenly believe are, you know, are doing something. So essentially what this is we're trying to invest in a startup which will be funding startups. How are there any mechanisms in place that you have to make sure that people are the student money is accountable and not just spent on random people that are just going to fail? Because, I mean, if we want to have an organization, say, at Concordia, is going to fund startup companies and then give money back to the CSU, that's one thing, but this money is just going to be in a sink, and most likely there's going to be no value added, it's just going to be lost. I think I did the calculations, about $6 per student per semester is just going to be lost, and extra, first of all, so I don't want to take that money away from the Silk Fund, because I believe the Silk Fund actually serves a very legitimate purpose. Give it up to a startup that's funding startups that has been loosely operational since 2015. Oh, the question is, what kind of mechanisms are you going to put in place to make sure that, you know, people trust your organization?
I'm also sorry, I never gave you the chance to answer from Rory, so if you'd like to. There's just a comment. Yeah.
It's more for council.
Yeah, fair. I could respond to both of those. So for Rory, I think that's, you know, it seems like, although I disagree, I can respect your position on that, but keep in mind that this is a referendum question, so it's operating through the most democratic mechanisms possible, and if you feel that way, I would encourage you to, you know, vote as you see fit, or form a campaign contrary to the one that we'll be running. And I would also be interested, if you'd like, in talking further as to why we believe this was the best direction. As for the other councillor, James?
Yeah.
Right, so firstly, it's not a startup, it's a service provider. Secondly, the accountability mechanisms will be presented on December 3rd with the rest of the documentation. Okay. Lastly, again, running through the referendum system, this is going to create like a new organization which will be a solidarity economy. By definition, a solidarity cooperative. By definition, a solidarity cooperative is 3 kinds of board seats. Some of those seats will be devoted towards like student members and CSU members, because obviously oversight and accountability is important. So these are good questions, and the concrete answers to all of them will be delivered with the rest of our constitution on December 3rd.
I think as a business accelerator that's promoting democracy, I think it would be pretty shady for us not to be operating democracy ourselves. And I am surprised you would think otherwise, think that we would be doing that.
What's your current budget compared to the projected revenues from a 35-cent fee levy?
Right, so over the course of the year we received grants from 3 different bodies, one of them being the CCSL to the amount of $4,000, the SAF to the amount of $5,000, and the CSU to the amount of $3,100. So clearly it's difficult to compare the scale of what we can currently have under, like, the scale we've currently been able to achieve relying on the grants and generous donations from organizations that believe in our mandate versus like what we want to achieve. But all of that again will be reported with the rest of the documentation on December 3rd.
Are there any other questions for our presenters?
So just to confirm, you'll be back here with us in December. Okay, so we can all prepare our questions for then?
Certainly. And
Great.
also, we hope that we'll pass along all the information. You can vet it as you see fit, and we'll be prepared to answer all of your questions. And also, that will just be the first step of many towards the fee levy campaign in the spring.
Sophie?
Yeah, sorry, just one last thing. So under bylaw 11.2 of the CSU, the only governing body with the ability to propose an amount of a fee levy is the Council of Representatives for a student union fee.
Okay. But as you can, okay, well this is on the second point, so we can address that when it comes up. But.
Rory?
Okay, can we just all take a moment and maybe restart this discussion in the context of that? Because it seems to me like there's a presentation for one thing, and now we're questioning whether the intent of it to create a fee levy is even possible. So could we maybe do a little bit of checking or discussion about that? Maybe Sophie, can you just expand upon that for my sake as a counselor?
Yeah, sure.
From your reading, and then maybe we can have someone explain, like again, the difference with what they're trying to do, just so we all are on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So in the section of the bylaws, it's section 11, which is student union fee, and 11.2 states the student union fee shall be set by referendum, notwithstanding bylaw 9.6, the Council of Representatives shall have the sole authority to propose the amount of the fee. Bylaw 9.6 basically states that a referendum can be called by promoters of a petition. So that's 9.6.2. So basically, then if you go to Special Bylaw J, which oversees the Silk Fund, there's no mention of external petitioners for the Silk Fund. So as that's a student union fee, I would say that this is the only governing body with the authority to decide the amount of any petitioned fee. That would be my reading of the bylaws.
Okay, I can respond to that. Well, I think that the reading of the bylaws in this case is incorrect, because the student union fee refers to the fee for the operations of the student union, which are listed within Special Bylaw I, and you'll notice that our referendum question 2 states mandate, meaning that it wouldn't come into effect immediately. It would simply mandate the incoming executive and team of the 2019 elections to begin working towards that end.
Special Bylaw I enumerates the Student Space Accessible Education and Legal Contingency Fund.
Right.
I just want to stop the back and forth. So James is on the list, so I'll put you on next if you like.
Oh, right. So governing, so have you, since I would like to kind of voice my agreement with Sophie on this matter, is that from those bylaws, it actually doesn't look like you can just simply, unless you can't simply drag money away from the Silk Fund without council's approval. So have you any plans now to change or modify your efforts in trying to essentially get money for your anti-market startup that's funding startups?
Again, I will draw the attention of the councillors and executives to the word mandate, which means that it would be a mandate for the incoming councillors and executives to work on, meaning that, yes, councillors, the board, is the final authority when it comes to the student union fees, and therefore this would be giving them a mandate to pursue what we've outlined in the referendum question.
Sophie?
Yeah, so sorry, just to reiterate, like a clarification, Special Bylaw I actually does say that one of the student union fees is the Silk Fund levy. So again, just to reiterate that, regardless of the question of mandate, I'd just like to say that that is in the bylaws, and I can point to it directly, and they're in the CSU Council group should anyone wish to look at them, and that's all.
Rory?
Yeah, okay, so question here, maybe for Sophie and your reading of it. As long as they're not pulling a fee levy from Silk, it's okay, but when they're asking to pull it from Silk, they can't?
So if they were to look for their own like individual fee levy as a non-CSU group, that would have actually had to go through policy committee back in a September deadline, so to create their own, that's in the standing regulations. So I can pull up the exact articles if you just give me a second. But to go through the referendum process to pull from the student union fee, this group would not be able to decide that amount. Only council could decide that amount and pull that amount from the Silk levy.
If I could respond?
wasn't a question.
That wasn't a question to you.
Patrick?
When do you want to present this referendum?
I could respond?
Yeah.
This would be for the spring. So, for example, what Sophie was referring to is for the by-election deadlines, which are in September, but the deadlines for the fee levies for the spring would be December 3rd, which is why that date has been brought up.
Are there any other questions for our presenters?
Okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Yep, there's another point, which is the one we've already discussed, but
Well, I guess like it'll come up and
I guess the first point would end up being moot of C's. Anyways, it'll end up coming up and we can rediscuss, but this was really just supposed to be a presentation. Like it's under the presentation point.
I'm not sure what's going on, so wait. We've now covered 2 agenda points basically at the same time. They're coming back in December, but there's no motion on the table.
yeah, I can just to clarify. So this is procedure, right? Because according to bylaw 9.6.2, CSU Council has to be made aware of petitions being circulated towards, affecting a fee levy. So this is purely informational, but it's therefore necessary to follow CSU procedure that those points be on your agenda, that you be made aware, that be discussed about, and that be entered into the official minutes for this meeting before we begin circulating them. Which is why, and also why it was in 2 separate points, because it's 2 separate referendum questions. Because one of them is specifically for the establishment of a fee levy, and the other one is, to mandate whatever team to do that.
So this will come back in December then? So we're de facto tabling this agenda point, like regardless of Marcus, just for a moment, council-wise, sorry Marcus, but council-wise, we need to be aware that this is de facto being tabled until December, correct? Okay, so are we then going to assume that Caitlin, who isn't here, who will be presumptively the chair in December, will know to have this on the agenda, or can we just make a motion to officially table this until December? I'm just not sure what needs to happen.
This is an informational point. It's not being tabled. This is just procedure. And then the 3rd of December, Marcus emailed me about this. It would be sent to policy first.
Okay.
And policy reviews it, and then it goes to council. So it'd probably be in January that we go to council next one, yeah.
Perfect.
Is it clear now?
So we have our way forward.
Everything's good.
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Marcus.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next point is appointments. The first one is Loyola Committee.
Thank you all for your time, and we'll see you all again.
I have a question. Is the modified agenda posted in the group?
No, I'm sending it and I'll send it to the executive for them to post it, not in the group. Does someone want to take over the point of Loyola Committee? Go for
Also,
it.
you all should go on Loyola Committee.
Yes. And usually
No, that's your turn. Go.
Okay, that's all we're waiting for. So welcome everybody to the beautiful Loyola campus, one of 2 trips the council will make down here. So if you want to be on the committee that's related to all things this campus, it's a really great committee. We have really good food, we have a good time. So, and we're working on some really cool, important stuff for this year, so please join, we have 2 spots.
Is there anyone interested in joining the Loyola Committee?
Okay, so I'm assuming this point will return at the next council meeting. The next appointment is for Clubs and Space Committee. I can take that over. Sorry, like Princess did not feel well, so she had to leave.
but Club and Space, because they're meeting, I think it's about once a month, please tell me if I'm wrong, and they're administrating basically everything that's kind of related to clubs and spaces around Concordia, which is a very large agenda, so it's like a very good opportunity. Feel free to join. Peter?
Yeah, I just want to add to the point because I resigned from this, and basically the whole thing is just to giving money out to the clubs and basically figure out what to do with the whole clubs and the whole thing. So, yeah.
So is there anyone interested in joining the Clubs and Space Committee? Okay, so I'm assuming.
I moved to table this till after the by-elections just because there aren't that many available committee seats, and we'll probably have some new councillors coming in after the by-elections, which are coming up fairly soonish. We only have a few more meetings before the by-elections happen, so I think it'd just be good to have a few seats besides just one committee available.
Marco? I'd second that. Does anyone have any comments on this? Anything to discuss about at this point? Okay, then it goes directly to a vote. So all in favor of tabling this until after the fall by-election? 1, 2, 3. 9. All against? Any abstentions? 1 exception. Great. So the next point would be new business informational, the first one being Senate and Board of Governors update. Sophie.
Hey. So I have officially been appointed to the Board of Governors, and I will be appointed to Senate at the November 9th meeting. The reason I was late, so I hope I was excused, and if I wasn't, yikers. I was? Cool. Thanks for excusing me. I was late because I was at the Board of Governors. So I will be submitting a report to the next regular council detailing the events going on at Senate and the board, and I'm really excited to be representing students on these governance bodies. So that's my update. Yay! And I'm off of conditional standing. That's why I'm on the board and Senate.
So we're going to have Rowan and Rory.
I was just wondering if there's, does this change the plans in terms of trying to get the university to change its...
Nope.
You know what I'm getting at.
Nope, the ad hoc committee for Senate regarding conditional standing and other eligibility requirements is still carrying on as presented last time. We haven't had an official steering meeting yet, but we will shortly, and that's still ongoing. We're not changing our plan about getting rid of the eligibility requirements.
Right?
Yeah, just to basically echo what Sophie said, Senate steering is next week or the week after, and that's when they'll be discussing the composition of the committee and how it will be formed and all that. So if there's any input that anyone wants to have, between now and it's like next Tuesday or Tuesday after. Next Tuesday, then let us know.
Just a question. I should know this, but I don't. You discussed this steering committee. Have you discussing just the eligibility requirement around grades, or is he also talking about potentially independent students being able to sit in Senate too?
So steering is not going to be. It's not through steering. It's going to be a separate ad hoc. So this steering will be talking about what the composition will be. It'll be most likely what it was 2 years ago, and who will sit on it. On the committee itself, the motion that was voted on was all of the eligibility requirements and not even just students, all of them. So it can be brought up for independent students to be also included.
Really salty about the fact that I was told in the past that I couldn't sit on Senate because independent students aren't serious about their academics. I will never get over that.
Are there any other questions about the Board of Governors update? Great. So the next 2 points are Cs 1 and 2 that Rory put on. Rory? But because of the
No, we had
conclusions surrounding Cs,
we did presentations. Yeah, we did it in presentations, so we don't have anything now. We're just going to move on for them. Well, we've covered them. The agenda points have happened.
Yeah, but procedurally you have to remove your points
like,
I motion to break Robert's rules for just removing it off the agenda. Is that a thing
I
we
don't
can
think we
do?
need to remove it.
Just call orders of the day.
Yeah.
yeah.
We just move on.
Yeah.
What does it cost? Just
So the point of information, can we have the new agenda sent this?
On this way, so sorry. Sorry.
Okay, so now we're on 8A.
Yes, now we're on 8A, temporary signing officer.
Okay. So I move that we can maybe informally push this to the end with 8C, and then we can do closed all at the same time. Cover the non-closed agenda items first, and then that way any guests like the media can feel free to leave.
So you want to table this to the end of the meeting?
Yeah, I moved to table 8A and C to, yeah, till the end of 8, basically.
I second.
Point of information. Is the point 8C, what's point 8C? Because I see the agenda there now and it's changed from what you
So
have.
the original agenda, 8A is temporary signing officer closed, 8C is consent training completion. I'm moving to table both of those till the end of point 8 in closed, so that we can let any guests leave, cover the open part of our agenda now,
So you
and do close to the end.
can't table a point 7 points away from it, several points away from it. So you can table this later, and then when we get to that point, table that later. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't double table all of them. I know procedurally that's how it would.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, can we just all be in agreement that we want to be nice to the media and just like let them go home earlier? Like, I think that's fair. But anyways, yeah.
Information, sorry, I wasn't here when the agenda was addressed, but like maybe when the agenda was changed, this could have been brought up, because like I feel like this could have.
It was confusing.
Okay.
Okay, so we had a mover and a seconder to table the temporary signing officer later into the, it was Patrick, I believe. To table the temporary signing officer till later. Is there any discussion surrounding this? Nope. Can we move all those for this? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Against? 0. And abstentions? 0. Cool. So the next thing would be audited finance statements.
Okay, so I have some printed documents to sort of guide you through. Does everybody not have this piece of paper? I have more. Okay, great. I also made a PowerPoint, and it turns out that there is no screen here, so that was a waste of time. Okay, but just getting a feel for the room, who has read the statements that were sent out to council?
Okay, really? I'm sorry.
Who here has read the audited financial statements that were in your council meeting package?
It's this paper, right?
No.
Oh, the statement.
Okay, cool.
Like our yearly finance.
Nope, that's fine. I just wanted to know, that's why I asked. So what you have in front of you with this document is something that is meant to sort of be a guide to walk you through it in a bit more simplified language if you don't have experience reading these things. It's based on something that was produced last year by last year's finance coordinator, so I've taken the numbers, updated them, and added a little bit extra to it. So this is meant to sort of be a plain language guide to make it a little bit more accessible, but it's still a 9-page document. So here we go. So what we're going to do is talk about first, there's 4 parts to this presentation. We're going over terms and concepts, just basics of audits. Then we'll be breaking down the audit, walking through it all. Then we'll be looking at reconciling the auditor's numbers with those of the CSU operating budget. And then finally, let's add a few comments of my own based on my response to these numbers. Great? Great. So, for those that don't know, an audit is an independent review of an organization's finances. What they do is they confirm the numbers are accurate and presented fairly. They are there to ensure that we're transparent. They safeguard against corruption within the organization. What the CSU does is every 3 years we do a request for proposals process. We'll pick an auditor based on whoever applies, and then they'll be the auditors for 3 years at a time. So currently our auditors are Deloitte. They're one of the big 4 auditing firms in Canada. And they've been doing it at CSU for quite a bit of time. Tonight we'll be voting on whether or not to approve the audited financial statements or not. So whether we accept that Deloitte's opinion of the state of our finances is accurate or not. And then if and once they are approved, we will post them on our website as is mandated by the standard regulations. The importance of proving this is that it's a declaration for federal and provincial taxes, maximum of 6 months after the year-end closure, plus there's transparency purposes for it as well. Some terms you should probably know. So these are called non-consolidated statements. What that means is that the CSU audit was independent of the CSU subsidiaries, which currently means the daycare. In the past, that includes something called CUSA Corp, which is now defunct and has become Reggie's. Next term to know is unqualified opinion versus qualified opinion. So those are 2 different types of auditor's opinions you can receive. It's counterintuitive, but unqualified is the one you want to get. That's the highest level. So an unqualified opinion is the highest standard. It states that the financial statements are accurate, everything's good, nothing's misrepresented. Everything seems legit. Whereas a qualified opinion says that the auditors didn't have enough information to make an unqualified opinion. So they might feel that the scope was limited, information wasn't ready, information wasn't there. Last year the CSU received a qualified opinion in their audit because some of the remnants of CUSA Corp, and those finances weren't in the best of order. This year we don't have to deal with anything related to CUSA Corp, so that was not needed to be included in the audit, and received our unqualified opinion. So this is improved over the last year. Although if we did not have CUSA Corp last year, we also would have received an unqualified opinion. So last year's audit financial statements are considered in very good order. Some other ideas: the fiscal year of the CSU runs from June 1st until May 31st. We operate through restricted fund accounting. What that means is that money collected for one purpose cannot be used for another purpose. So money that's collected for the Silk Fund can't be used for the operations fund. Money that's collected for clubs is for clubs, etc. So those are the main things to keep in mind. Now move into the breakdown of the audit itself. So just going to move along here. There's more notes in the paper document itself. I'm just working from my PowerPoint here. So the audit document is split into 6 parts. You have the independent auditor's report, the non-consolidated statement of operations, the non-consolidated statement of changes in net assets, the non-consolidated balance sheet, the non-consolidated statement of cash flows, and then finally you have notes to the non-consolidated financial statements. Okay? So, we're going to move right ahead to the section 2. So that's page 2 to 3 in the physical auditor's report. That's not this document, that's the one they have in PDF. So it's page 4 to 5 in the PDF file. So what that does is a statement of the loss of operations shown in the organization's revenues and expenses. Page 2, so the page 4 in the PDF shows the 2017-18 year. Page 5 would show the 2016-17 year. Okay. So the summary of changes, really high level, the big change that happened between 2017 to 18 is that there was a slight increase in student fees. There was increased revenue to the health plan with decreased expenses. The revenue for the Silk Fund decreased by $413,091, while expenses increased by $219,090. And the general fund, the total revenue fell by $33,000, with an increase in expenses worth about $19,500, roughly. So, overall, the Silk Fund ran a surplus of $445,332. The general fund ran a deficit of $442,165. And so the total revenues less expenses of the CSU was $3,167. So the very, very slight increase in the overall net value of the CSU. Moving along to the changes in net assets. The Silk Fund, the balance from year beginning to year end, the balance grew by $345,987 to a total balance of $10,140,239. The general fund balance decreased by $48,593 to a balance of $1,121,112, while our capital asset investments decreased by $294,227 to a total of $1,765,763. And so adding all those three together, the total balance, again, grew by $3,167 to a total balance of assets to 13,027,114. Moving along, you have the non-consolidated balance sheet. This is page 8 in the PDF file. This is probably the most significant page for reporting the state of the CSU's finances. If you're looking for one document, go there first. Although all the information is useful, this is probably the first place you want to look. We're voting on it all, but we're in particular voting on this statement here. So what the auditor said was that our overall assets decreased. Sorry, go back a step there. The balance sheet shows the balance of assets, liabilities, and capital of an organization, and is an essential accounting tool to ensure that all the statements are correct. Our assets decreased by 38,919 to a total of 3,377,146. Our investment in capital assets increased by just shy of $400,000 to a total of 111,126,915. The liabilities increased by 356,893 to a total of 1,476,947. Meaning, again, the net assets increased by 3,157 to, again, 13,027,000. Next up, we have the statement of cash flow. What this is, that's on page 9 in the PDF file. A cash flow statement breaks down the operating, investing, and financing activities of an organization. It's important in identifying the cash coming in and out of the organization. So, the operating activities saw a significant decrease in excess revenue versus expenses. So in 2017, we had a surplus of 1,083,389. This fell to 3,167 in 2018. So there's a much larger surplus in operating activities the year before. So this fall in the surplus was mitigated a bit by a significant increase in changes to non-cash operating working capital items. However, there was a net increase of cash and cash equivalents of 142,978 to a total cash and cash equivalents of $2,045,035. So those are not all, but some of the big numbers contained in the audit report. Moving on, section 3 is reconciliation of the CSU operations budget. This is where you want to look at the document here. So I'm going to look to a couple pages in when you see some charts. Okay? They're also going to be on the screen. But, So, the auditor's report shows the numbers for the 2017-18 fiscal year that do not appear on the operating budget, but are necessary for reconciling the operating numbers. Okay? So, what's shown in the operating budget for the CSU last year will not be identical to what's in the auditor's report. There's a lot more items going on. There's capital expenses, there's investments, all that stuff. So now we're trying to take the auditor's numbers and reconcile it with our own numbers within the CSU and the operating budget and our actual stuff like that. So looking at this, it's important to note that an operating budget is only a projection of how much an organization plans on spending and receiving for its total operations. In the CSU use case, the total operations are the sum of admin operations, service operations, meaning Hojo, LIC, and advocacy, and clubs. Great. So now let's take a look at that graph. You'll see up in the top corner where it says Audit Final 2017-18. That's the first column. The first column. You'll see 3 figures there: the profit/loss of the CSU, amortization, and the health and dental plan. So you take the profit and the amortization and the health dental plan, and you can create what your operating profit or loss is for the year. That's not overall to the CSU because it's excluding a lot of investment in silk fund stuff, but within the operations fund, because again we use restricted accounting, this is showing what's going on in our operations world of things. So you'll notice that there's some variances there. Once you look down a little bit, go to which is operating, Hojo, advocacy, LIC, and clubs. What you see there is 3 columns. CSU internal actual 2017-18. On the far right, you'll see the CSU budget 2017-18. That's what council approved. And then in the middle, you have the variance between what was budgeted and what actually happened. So you'll notice if you look at operating, there's a significant difference between the budgeted 87,500 surplus and the 292,829 deficit. As well, you know some figures. Hojo was in an unpredicted deficit. and clubs was significantly in deficit, which was not budgeted for either. So this is important to know. I need to explain to you what happened. This was, again, not as a result of decisions made by most people here, because it was last year's executive that's reporting what happened last year, but it is important to note this is happening. This is the status of the CSU's finances. We can talk about what to do about it later, but this is significant. Okay, so if we go to the next page. Yeah. So, oops, turn one page. The variance in the operation funds has a number of items to explain it. This is in a chart later on in the document, the second one. The main explanation for this variance was around changes in student fees. And there's two parts to that, but the total difference was $212,000. The majority of this came from the fact that in 2015, Concordia made an error in calculating how much revenue was supposed to go to the CSU. They discovered it late last year and then clawed back our revenues. So that gave us a hit of quite a bit, more than $100,000. In addition, because of these miscalculations made by Concordia, the CSU itself, when it was doing its budget process each year, had faulty predictions. So we in turn overestimated how much revenue would come in, and then we came into a surprise at the end of the year. So that's those two errors there accounts for $212,000 of that variance. The other two major items were the fact that at the end of last fiscal year, CSU Council voted for an increase in executive salaries that would be retroactive for the whole year. So that added $56,504 to the expenses. And then the third one will be around elections referendums, where there was incidents where we had to do cost overruns due to some, what was it the CEO did? He took down a bunch of posters from FASA, and then the CSU had to pay reparations to them. Plus there was like overruns in the CEO's salary mostly. So that resulted in significant overruns there of $27,606. Those three items together account for $296,110 of the $292,000 deficit. The two other things to point out there was that with Hojo, they normally get a $20,000 grant from the Dean of Students each year. They didn't last year, so that mostly accounts for the variance in their budgeted versus actuals. And then with the clubs, we had the fact that the clubs were significantly active compared to prior years, so that rose expenses quite a bit just to make sure the clubs could do their activities, as well as the fact that there was a decrease in the club's levy. Okay, so next up, if you look at the second last page, there's another graph there. This shows our cumulative results over a multiple year period. So you can see what the final revenues less expenses were for each department. So it's operating advocacy, Hojo, LIC, and clubs. There's also an additional line there for capital projects, capital investments, or capital purchases. These are things that you don't put in the operations budget or report in the operations actuals because they're not annual budget lines. But when you do things like purchase new printers or what have you, those are costs we incur. They do affect our bottom line. So you can get a sense of what the capital expenditures were in previous years as well as what they're currently projected to be for this year. With the ones for this year broken down under the capital and non-recurring projects. Not all of these have actually been approved yet. Any asset purchase of $1,000 or more has to be approved by Finance Committee. So again, this is $117,000 is not actuals, that is budgeted. But these are things that we know are important, and at some point these motions will be coming forward towards council because we need a website, we need to be able to do printing, we need IT equipment, that kind of stuff. Okay? So, all in all, the operations fund, you can see once 2017-18, that's when a new fee levy structure was brought into place. That's when both the Advocacy Center and the Clubs Department decreased their levy. You can see the deficits start to rise at that point, as well as when the clawback in 2017-18 starts to hit us from Concordia, that sunk our operating by quite a bit. So the situation's not looking good, but again, the last year we ran an operations deficit of $348,000, and the crunch isn't going to get any better. So we need to figure out what we're going to do about this. And so I have a recommendation around this, which is that I've been saying this since we approved the budget in June. So this shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but I do think we need to restore the levies that were reduced from clubs and advocacy so they can continue to fund their operations. But likely an increase in the operations budget is also a good idea, due to the fact that we want to be able to continue operating services at the same level, while also being able to just afford our day-to-day stuff. To do this, I suggest that we not increase fees, but simply restructure our levies so that we can reduce the amount from the Silk Fund and put it onto our other departments, because we are still seeing a large surplus in the Silk Fund every year. We can't spend it fast enough. I think that's the least painful way of solving this problem. But I'm open to other ideas if folks have them. There is a recommendation embedded in this document circulated here. This is not being voted on today. We're voting on simply accepting the auditor's report as their opinion. This is simply my opinion about how to bring a referendum question that has to go through Finance Committee, it has to go through Policy and Council. But I'm just repeating again that I think that if we want to be able to continue to operate our service at the same level, ensure the clubs get their funding, we are going to have to restructure our fee levy. Or reduce services, which I don't think is the best option. So with that, I hope that that clarifies some things, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Okay. I have so many things I want to say, and I guess some of them are motions, but I can't do that all at the same time. So let me try and go through this. First off, I want to say thank you, John. I really respect the work that you put into this document. It looks like you spent quite a lot of time trying to make things, understandable for councillors. So I really respect this. I have a couple reservations. I have some reservations about the audited statements. I have a list of questions, specific things in there. I don't know whether it's even worth it or appropriate to ask those now. Secondly, while I respect that this document was put together, I think council got it a little too late to properly sort of read it and digest it. I mean, even myself, I was trying to skim through it as the meeting started, and as a finance major, there are things in here that's confusing. Sometimes you mention like conventions. So if a number is negative, it's put in brackets. If it's an expense, it's not put in brackets, because an expense is by definition a negative number or a reduction of something. Conventions like that, they're used a little bit differently throughout this document, and it's hard to compare these spreadsheet screenshots that I see here with what I'm used to seeing in an accounting standard. So for some things, like I'm looking at the screenshots of the spreadsheets and I'm confused. So I'd like a little bit more time to go over this, have the opportunity to go over it with either, I guess I shouldn't say yourself, I should say that the finance coordinator or finance committee, but I would also hesitate to say that council hasn't had enough time to digest this either. One of the questions I have is, do we actually need to be approving these audited statements today? If not, is it possible for us to push the approval of these statements until later? And then maybe in between we can have some training for councillors about it and the opportunity to ask more questions. Excuse me. I just think it's inappropriate for council, if we haven't read either the statements or this document and don't understand them properly, to approve them. I don't want to stonewall things, but I can't put my vote to it right now.
The short answer is there's no urgency behind this. This can totally be tabled. Okay. I do apologize for lateness. I was working on it up until this afternoon, so I totally understand that perspective. Like, if folks need more time to look at it, that's not an issue for me at all.
I guess I want to feel the room, because I do have questions about the statements themselves, but I figure if if council isn't ready to have a discussion about them and approve them, and we need more time to review them at all, then I don't want to waste our time having a partial discussion now and a partial discussion later. So if I can motion, I know I'm not allowed to speak and then motion, but if I can motion to table it until next council, then if the motion fails, then I'll go ahead with answering or asking some of my questions. But otherwise, I guess I'll save those.
I'll let Carol go and then John.
Yeah, thank you. So I agree with some of Rory said, mainly because I study economics, right? And basically the second thing is, I don't think student associations are supposed to be in a deficit, like financially wise. So my question to you, John, if possible, if I can answer it, when did you think the deficit started? And I know you mentioned in your recommendation that we change our structure. If a recommendation isn't further followed through in terms of a referendum question or in terms of a new budgeting structure, do you have a projection where the deficits might go?
Sure. So if you look at this cumulative results, that shows when deficits started or ceased in different departments. So the first deficit in the operations fund side of things was 2017-18. Okay. Advocacy has been they had a very small deficit of just under $500 in 2015-16, but that increased from a surplus of $27,500 to $52,596 in 2017-18. That was after their fee levy was decreased, at the same time as admin was cutting back their own advocacy services. So demand on this advocacy increased as the levy went down. So that's really the start of their fiscal non-sustainability point. Advocacy needs a fee increase somehow, otherwise it's not going to work. The deficit for advocacy is not going to grow a whole lot. It'll be more or less stable. They have a certain amount of staff, a certain amount of expenses budgeted each year, but it'll be consistently in that 50,000-ish range. Although we are currently budgeting for 30,000, but that's still 30,000. You see that from 2015 to the present, advocacy has a cumulative deficit of 55,471. Again, the operations side, the deficit just started this year. The year before that, there was a surplus. With Hojo, they've been doing a pretty decent job of running surpluses. If you look at the past years, they ran 26,000 surplus, then an 18,700 surplus. Last year, they didn't get their Dean of Students grant. Mostly it's because they didn't apply. They weren't rejected for it. So that accounts for about $20,000 worth of that. So Hojo's already on track to, where it says the budget is deficit is 7,490. That will actually only be hit if the Hojo gets what was budgeted for, $10,000 in IT expenses. We set that money in the budget because a couple of years ago, it was a year or two ago, Hojo got attacked by hackers. And so we want to make sure that if that happens again, we'll have the money in the budget to prepare themselves. But it's not guaranteed they'll actually spend that $10,000. So they might be in a surplus this year as well, and even guaranteed if they get the Dean of Students grant, which I've seen through CCSL, that they do have $20,000 earmarked in the Dean of Students budget for Hojo. So if they apply for it, they'll get it. LIC has done a good job of running surpluses in recent years. They're on track to, again, the deficit is budgeted there. They're doing a good job of containing expenses. I don't think they'll finish the year in a deficit, but they don't need a change in the fee levy structure. They can just modify a few office expenses. Clubs, again, the deficit started in 2016-17, but it went from a small amount to a huge amount in 2017-18. And that was, again, the year that the fee levy was decreased and club activities went way up. So, again, we need about a roughly 10-cent increase in clubs to stabilize that. The final piece, of course, for the deficit is around capital projects, which this year, what's predicted to be necessary for the CSU is a lot higher than in more recent years. And that eats into our bank accounts, even though it's not an annual expense. So I don't know what the multi-year projection is around capital expenditures, but it's a big one this year that we just need to think about. So what I do know is that each year our end of year balance is becoming smaller than our start of year balance, and we almost made it through this summer without having the bank account go dry before the student fees arrived in September, but I'm not sure we can do the same thing this year without a loan from the SIP fund.
Can I also respond to the question about advocacy? So I think it's important that John, you know that the advocacy fee levy was also decreased. So we're looking at 2 fee levies that were decreased, and now we realize that was a bad move, and we need to increase them. Advocacy would go back to their previous fee levy, and I think that's important to mention. And also, the Concordia Advocacy Center is being majorly downsized, and advocacy at the CSU has had to pick up for the university's service.
John, you were on the list to go next, but I realized that you spent a lot of that time answering Caleb's question. Did you have anything else?
Yeah, which is a little, I guess, was kind of, sort of responding to Roy, but not really. This document that was circulated here is not coming to a vote. This is just sort of a guide on how to read the statements. The only thing that would get voted on is what was submitted to council in the Deloitte report. That said, it's not a problem in any capacity. If people want more time to think about it, ask questions. That's not in any way problematic.
Sophie? Yeah, just to sort of put this out there, the CSU is a nonprofit organization, and in the past the CSU had run for several years surpluses, which jeopardized our nonprofit status. So while I agree that for the long term deficits shouldn't be run, it's also not a problem in the short term for a deficit to exist, as long as it's not going to create a structural deficit as we've seen with the decrease in fee levies. So this is like giving you the heads up that looking into restructuring the fee levies needs to happen so that we can prevent a structural deficit.
Can I comment on that? Someone's also on the speakers list.
John, what do you think?
Okay.
Is it just me and then John?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Was I gonna? I think Sophie covered everything I had to say. Actually, yeah.
Rory?
Okay, so I want to make 2 points. And I don't want to geek out here as a JMSB student, but I have an issue when we talk about, and I'm just raising this as like a flag of one very, very small example of multiple systemic issues in the CSU's current budgeting system and the way that we're managing our finances. Hojo should never have expected a $20,000 grant from the Dean of Students, even if it had been given in the past. Revenue recognition can only be done on 3 IFRS criteria: performance, collectability, and measurability. If you cannot guarantee that that amount is collectible, then you cannot put it in your budget as expected revenue. You cannot rely upon that. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have, fundamentally. I'm not saying that they don't deserve the money. I'm not saying anything of that nature. All I'm saying is that the method in which we budgeted, the method in which we came up with these numbers, and we're now arriving at these deficits, has at least some small part of it is because of some flawed, systemic issues. My second issue is with Sophie's statement that we were close to losing our nonprofit status. And this is maybe more of a question. My understanding of nonprofit accounting rules is that profit is considered when you are making an excess of revenues over expenses, and that you then remit that profit to your shareholders. So if we as directors of the corporation took a bonus at the end of the year because our budget was in the green, shall we say, that would violate the nonprofit rule because we would be profiting from it. To have an excess of revenues over expenses just means, well, we have extra money saved. We can still put that towards other activities in the future. If we gave it out to our shareholders, be it the Concordia students, as like a dividend, that would again be, we've profited. The corporation has profited, and we're sharing those profits with our shareholders. As long as that money does not leave the corporation, we can make $100,000. We can make a 10% profit one year. But as long as it doesn't leave the corporation, as long as it's retained and we keep it and we use it in the future, maybe next year's budget, maybe, you know, it's put into capital assets like buying a building, whatever. As long as that's done, we can't lose our status as a nonprofit. So I guess I'm concerned when you know, Sophie, or I guess the general coordinator, makes that statement. I'm confused as to what is meant by that, as to what the situation was when we were at risk of losing our status. And all this to say that I think council needs to do some finance training before we can have an intelligible conversation about this. There's red flags. John has raised, we have a budget deficit, we have issues with our finances, period. We need to be having hard conversations about, are we increasing fee levies for X, for Y, for Z? Are we rebalancing our budget? Are we, you know, what do we do for the future? And the problem is that we are a recurring group of people every year, and we don't see this 3-year out projection of, you know, the CSU is going down the tubes. We're having these red flags that there's issues with the budget, but we're only here for 1 year. By the time we're done, it's other people, and they don't understand the finances either, and they're coming in and trying to scramble to catch up. So I think what we need to focus on this year is we've identified problems, we need to get this sorted before next year comes in. And that means that we as a group all need to take responsibility for fixing this issue now during our mandates. And the first step in that is us all learning enough finance, you know, getting our hands dirty, enough that we can actually look at this finance stuff as a group, as a whole council. Because it can't just be FinCom, and it can't just be John, and it can't just be presentations at council and then motions where we're not sure what's going on. Thank you.
So I have John on the speakers list, but I have people who have put their hand up before that haven't spoken before. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go to the first speaker list. Patrick?
I mean, I would like to sort of echo what Rory is saying. This is just a specific example, is that we spent in 2018 on our general election $53,000, and we had 1,400 people vote. To me, that, like, in a financial sense doesn't make any sense. I know that we do pay our CEOs, our DEOs, and our ballot counters fairly, and I get that, but, like, this is just a specific example of, like, okay, like this isn't on anybody here, by the way. This is just more of a, like, how we're actually spending money too. It's like we're spending $53,000 on an election, and I know, like, it was around 20,000 more probably than the last year, but it's still, it doesn't make sense. And I do think, like, we all need to kind of, like, get at least some basic training so we kind of understand more about this, because, like, we're not all in finance. We're not all at JMSB, and we're not all good with numbers. But, like, getting a basic sense of all this would be a really good, like, this would be a good addition for that. But yeah.
Anybody else think they want to say first? Because I've been speaking a lot.
So I completely agree there should be finance training, and we're working on coming up with a fiduciary responsibility training. We were supposed to have one with like a lawyer coming in, and we're still working out the logistics of that. What I'll also say is that this is something I learned during my Board of Governors training, is that the role of a board of a corporation is to have your noses in and your fingers out. So, like, I really appreciate that everyone wants to, you know, get their hands dirty, but that's not really explicitly the board's role. Like, it's very important that you're scrutinizing and that the board is scrutinizing and holding us accountable. Just as, like, I understand that people might have mixed feelings, but I'd appreciate it if folks didn't roll their eyes at me or at things that I'm saying. That's awesome, always. Yeah, just to say that, like, I understand that this is an important thing. We all understand we are trying to find solutions, and we would like help and backup, and we do want everyone to get training, and that is something that's in the works. But just a little reminder about noses in, fingers out.
Yeah, so just want to use a couple comments there. The point about Hojo, spot on. Budgeting for a grant to come every year is not good practice. I just want to know that the budget we approved back in June does not anticipate any revenues from students. It's a bonus if we get it, but it's not something that we're anticipating. So the numbers there are reflective of everything else. So just wanted to flag that. Yeah, going back to the finance training, agreed. Part of the program of trainings that we're going to do at the retreat that didn't happen included fiduciary responsibility training. The presentation that was supposed to happen tonight, because the lawyers wasn't quite ready, couldn't make it, was supposed to include rights and responsibilities of board of directors and fiduciary responsibility and a lot of those concepts. So like, we're definitely thinking about it, we're planning for it. It is coming. It's a very, very, very good point. And then I want to jump back to the comment about should nonprofits organizations be running deficits or not. The key thing to know is that deficits aren't inherently a good or a bad thing. It's whether you're capable of financing a deficit. So in the case of, say, Hojo, which has over the past several years run operating surpluses. So again, 26,000 in 2015-16, another 18,000 in 2016. Right now they have a cumulative surplus from the 2015 to 19 period of 22,291. They can afford to run a deficit because they have the money in the bank to do it. But if you're running deficits for years and years, you won't have that surplus rollover from previous years to deal with. So sometimes you can afford a deficit, sometimes you can't, and you got to be able to look at your overall numbers and see if it makes sense or not. For now, we are not going to go bankrupt tomorrow. That's not a thing. But we are witnessing an increase in expenditures that we need to be keeping an eye on. So the fact that we're in a deficit isn't cause for alarm. I don't want to get that impression on folks. But it is something we have to address before it becomes worse. So again, looking at that chart with the cumulative results, you can see the cumulative surpluses over a multi-year period. Operations does have, for 2015-19, a surplus of 6,712, which isn't very much, but it is something. So I'll leave it at that.
All right.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I think it's irresponsible of us as board members to see this pattern, to have this pattern happen before us of deficits, regardless of whether deficits are a good or bad thing. You know, as John mentioned, as I tried to mention before, it's not that they're necessarily bad. We're not going, you know, quote, bankrupt, but to see a deficit and to not act on it, to not do something about it. For everyone in this room, that's probably our number one or number two fiduciary responsibility to the corporation, is its finances and its financial viability. And for us to see this, to have it said, mentioned, not once, not twice, like 3 times now this has come up, and to not fix it is extremely irresponsible. Secondly, I just want to say, I like Concordia's sort of saying, you know, the noses in, fingers out. It's a great moniker. I would disagree that that the board being involved in the finances of the corporation is, you know, micromanaging. There's a difference between the board, you know, discussing the payment of X supplier or Y supplier, or, you know, these small amounts, but it is explicitly the board's job to set a budget, allocate funds, reallocate funds, address financial deficits. It's not to say that we're telling John how to do his job. It's not to say that we're micromanaging the spending of the money. That is for the executives to do. But some situation like this, where we have issues with how we're budgeting things long term and our revenues, that is absolutely for council to sit through as a group and discuss and deal with. Because solutions aren't going to pop, like solutions aren't any one individual's job to come up with. It's not for John to magically pull, you know, green numbers out of his hat. It's not for him to pull us out of a deficit by himself. He can't. That's not his responsibility. As the board, that is our number one responsibility, is to keep the corporation financially viable. So I think it is definitely our duty to go over this issue in future. As I said in point number 1, I think it's irresponsible if we don't. We need to talk about how to fix this deficit in the future. And I think we should just do it, you know, when this is tabled and when we can have the opportunity to all get some finance training, so we can be on the same page when we're having a conversation about it. Thank you.
Are there any more points on audited finance statements? Was there a motion that was attached to this, John?
The motion was to be it therefore resolved that CSU Council approve the audited financial statements by Deloitte. Well, I don't recall if Roy made a motion to table or was just talking.
I think it was ignored.
Okay.
Well, it's because you talked and then you
Yeah, then I acknowledge that, it's fine.
So is the table motion on the floor or is the approve on the floor?
The approval.
Great.
The approval wasn't made.
Well, the
Motion to
approve is on the floor right now.
The agenda point to approve is on the floor. Nobody moved the motion.
I moved the motion.
You just moved the motion?
Yeah.
Hasn't been seconded.
To approve the financial statements. After the discussion we just had? Okay.
Well, once it's on the floor, then you can make your motion to table.
It was the motion.
It's just a procedure point.
We're moving to approve and then we're going to move the table? No, we move to approve before we move the table.
Yeah, this is the chair. Hi. So like,
Maybe a bit of respect. So I did not get any of the motions that were sent out, so I don't know if a motion was sent out, then that's the motion that's on the floor right now. I don't know if a motion was on the floor. So I was asked, is there a motion on the, if a motion was sent out to council that was attached to this point, then that would be the motion on the floor. That's why I asked. So was that sent out at all?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so that is the motion on the floor. It is automatically seconded because it is something that has been attached to the agenda. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sorry, calling it procedural inquiry. I don't actually think that that's how Robert's Rules does things, nor how the CSU does things. A motion still has to be moved and seconded by the members of the assembly at the meeting. My misunderstanding is that you're assuming this motion has already been moved and we're going to vote on it.
So.
It's been sent in advance, doesn't mean that it's automatically on the floor to be
Point
moved.
of order, the motion has been read from my understanding. The motion has not been seconded. Would that make everyone in the room happy so that we can move forward to either not having the motion seconded and then it fails and then whatever discussion wants to come after the motion fails can be met? But this back and forth between the chair and a counselor is going longer than reasonably it should because of procedural nitpicking. If I may use that word. So the motion has been read by John, it has not been seconded. If no one seconds it, the motion it fails. So, does anyone, can we let the chair do their job? Thank you.
Point of information or I guess maybe it's a question for John. Does the motion, is it only to approve that document that was already created, or is it to approve the money? Because we had a lot of discussion about what should be done with our budget, but I feel like the motion was just to approve this document made by an outside source. But
So the motion is
not that one, but
the motion is to approve the document that was sent in the council package originally. It was produced by Deloitte. So we're not approving spending any new money. We're not approving any mandates. It is saying that we accept that the statement produced by Deloitte is accurate, reflecting of the state of the CSU finances. So this document that I circulated in physical form now is not being voted on.
well, I meant the audit, the PDF that you sent, not the this document. I'm sorry, I applied to this one.
The motion is to accept Deloitte's opinion, effectively.
Okay, thank you.
Rory, you had your hand up.
Just procedurally, it has to be seconded before we discuss it, but if it hasn't been seconded yet, then we're still back to...
Procedurally, there's been a lot of things that have been going on that
Yes.
haven't necessarily been respected, or people talking over each other and that kind of thing. So, I don't know. Yes.
I'd like to second.
Okay. So we have a motion that was seconded very, very long after it was actually motioned. Does anyone have any discussion surrounding this? Anything to say about it? There's been a lot of discussion already. Rory?
Yeah, I just think it's in extreme bad faith that at the very beginning of this discussion, I said, look, I have questions about these statements, and I'll make them now if we're actually going to be moving to approve them. But if we can all table it until later, when we've had time to read the other document that was sent to join with it, then I would withhold my questions. So at this point, I now feel like the opportunity for me to ask substantial questions about the documents that, are now on the floor to be approved has been sort of removed. So I have an issue with that, just procedurally. I think based on the conversation that's been had on the floor about this topic, it just seems in bad faith to move to approve it. And like to emphasize, audited financial statements are the first, if not the second, most important financial document of this corporation each year. Budget and this. Like, there's nothing else. These are audited by Deloitte. For us to just approve them tonight, after the conversation we just had about them, without the opportunity for asking any further questions, I think it's irresponsible of the entire council to do that. So I, for one, can definitely not approve this.
I motion to table.
There's a motion already.
And I motion to table. Like, just procedurally, once it's on the floor, you can then motion to defer to another meeting. That's all that I was doing.
Next council.
Sure. Yeah. Motion to table until next council meeting.
We have to vote on the first one before. No? No. If it's to table, I can. Okay, sorry, it's fine. Is there? There's no discussion on to table. Does anyone want to talk about tabling it? I'm pretty sure there's no discussion surrounding tabling it. But I read the book this morning very quickly. Okay. Okay. So all who approve tabling this until your November meeting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And against? There's some abstentions. I think everyone voted. So. Okay, perfect. It was 11 for no against, no abstentions. So I have 2 different points that are both consent training completion next. So the first consent training completion. Rory?
So as mentioned previously, can we move to now table this to the end when we have the 8A, which is now 8 something else? Yeah. I motioned this earlier and you said that I couldn't do 2 points at the same time, so now we're at the second point and I'm now doing the second point.
Does anyone want to prevent tabling this to the end of the meeting? Can I get your name again?
Jared.
Jared, okay. Okay. There's no discussion surrounding tabling. Is there? No one has anything. So all for tabling consent training completion, the first point to the end after temporary signing officer. It would basically be the end. Yeah. Please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Against?
Point of information, is that a closed session? Because it wasn't in the agenda.
It doesn't say closed session in
Right.
the
That was my
agenda.
tabling, was to table it to the end under closed. I mentioned it when I moved to point 8A, and I mentioned it again when I moved to this point.
He did.
That's the whole point of putting it at the end, is that we can do all the closed sessions at the same time.
I think what the question is basically is that there's an assumption that it's going to be under closed because it wasn't in brackets closed afterwards.
The motion is to push it to the end under closed session with everything else in closed session.
But was it supposed to be in closed session?
No. No.
It was not initially needed to add closed session. That doesn't mean we can't make it.
Okay.
We just voted.
Yeah, we just voted, so it's at the end of the agenda. Rory?
Yeah, I know I'm speaking a lot, so sorry for those who hate the sound of my voice. You mentioned that the next point is a second consent training point. Now, my understanding from speaking with Peter is that it actually is poorly labeled as consent training. It isn't related. I know the understanding when we formulated the agenda at the beginning of the meeting was that it was related to consent training, so you had it labeled as a second consent training point. It's actually not related to consent training at all, but I would think that we could still hear it. My only caveat is that perhaps we should ask Peter if this point is of a personal nature, and if they would like it in closed session, because my understanding is that it might be.
It's actually okay because I do want to since the media process here is good, but if possible, can we move it to right before we go into closed session, the last point, right before we go into the closed session, please?
So you'd like to move it to, essentially it would end up right after the chairperson's report.
Yeah.
Does anyone have second that? James. Okay. Can everyone who approves of tabling this to right before temporary signing officer and right after chairperson's report raise their hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Against? Abstention? Are you for or against?
I'm for.
Okay. Abstentions? 1 abstention. Oh, 2 abstentions and 5 for. 5 F4. Okay.
This one is 4 against, right?
No one was against. So the next point is by-elections.
Yes. Okay, I can do it. Yes, so we are still, should have been an informational, and this is my apologies. We're still looking for a CEO. Basically, the job posting is still up on the website, and we haven't, as far as I'm concerned, we haven't.
We
want
have
to think of it?
no CEO candidates.
No, we do have a CEO.
We have one CEO candidate?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is confirmed.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
So we'll be calling.
Yeah, we'll be calling a special council meeting for next week to make sure that the CEO is approved and the elections are arriving on time. Yes.
I didn't get your name.
My name's Chris.
Chris? Okay. Chris.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say something like, it's great that we have one candidate. I'd just like to emphasize it'd be great to have hopefully 2 or 3. I know.
Nobody's applying.
But the problem is we're going to end up in the same situation as last year, and we're going to.
We know, like.
I think, is it possible to extend the deadline for the CEO application?
Seems like everyone else responded,
but if you have more. Just to give you some context, so there's a lot of logistical issues. You know, we did have this job posting up for a very long time, but since last year, with so much of a mess, people are kind of scared to take this position, to be honest. So we have found somebody. We've worked really hard to find somebody who is competent. They will be interviewed, so that's still up to be approved. But at the same time, you know, with the bookings, for instance, for the polling stations, that is done really, really in advance. And the office coordinator had to even negotiate with facilities around this. So if we moved it even a little bit, we would have none of our bookings for those spaces, and it would cause, it's not an ideal situation at all. And we're actually working really hard to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and so that the March elections are going much more smoothly, and that's part of our governance review and some of the policy changes that we're doing right now, but definitely the situation is not ideal at all.
Rory?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Chris has said. I understand that it's hard to get someone to be CEO. Maybe we need to look at like alternative ways to market it, redo the job, reconsider the compensation. Like, yeah, it's a shitty situation, but it would be nice to have more than one candidate, seeing as it's such an important job.
Michaela, you were next on the list, but I don't know if you had anything more to add.
Just to reiterate, it's really unfortunate. However, I think the person who's applied does have the ability to do at least even if maybe we could look into a temporary position just for this one election, we could find those alternatives maybe.
Patrick?
I like what's just been proposed by Michaela, just because this is a bit of constructive criticism, is that I felt that the position wasn't advertised as well as it could be. Like, I've talked to some of my friend circles, I've tried talking to a few people, and they didn't even know up until I told them about this. And it's just unfortunate because like we could be communicating better with the student body. There are ways to do it, and we could have probably found some better candidates too. Well, some great candidates as well, sorry, I take that back. I mean some great candidates just as well as this one that you have. Because it's, like for any job that's really important, like this job, it's important to have like a good competition for the job. But anyways, yeah, thanks.
Chris.
Yeah. So I understand it's a bad situation, and we're obviously all here to try our best to like power through and make the best possible situation come out. I'd like to propose that we appoint some sort of DEO first. We could pay them a higher rate. They could do all the bookings, they could start while we find a CEO, or at least 3. I think we shouldn't be going to an interview without at least 3 candidates, because last year we saw how disastrous it was, and like I don't think it's an option to be in a situation where we have 1 candidate, because then we're basically forced to go with that candidate even if we don't believe they're the best for the job.
Yeah, just a couple things. In terms of all things communications, I think it's like a little bit moot to be speaking about that now. We have a unionized communications coordinator at the student union, and so these are general communications problems that are being brought up. If people aren't seeing our job postings, like we are currently working with our communications coordinator to have a better strategy, but to say like we should have found a better way for this one instance, there's a lot in communication that needs to be worked on, and we just got a communications coordinator a month ago. So that's like not really something we can fix right now, it's too late. And then that's not the DEO's job, so it needs,
It's a conflict of interest, we can't hire a DEO, it has to be independent.
Yeah, it has to be hired from the CEO, and they need a boss, which would be the CEO, and so without that, it just wouldn't function.
May I respond to that?
Was that a question?
It wasn't a question, but there was no one else on the list.
All right, if we could hire then a temporary person, anything, we could label it whatever, just to do the bookings while we find more candidates for a CEO.
Order, I guess. There are booking officers of the union who are currently working on the bookings. It's just that to call the dates and to do anything related to the elections, we need a chief electoral officer. And so while I really like hear the room and understand your concerns and find them very valid, as someone in the room who was disqualified twice by the past CEO, I am very sympathetic to the issues of finding a good CEO. Like I get that, but disqualified wrongly. And so like I do hear that and I do understand, but we are working very hard to come up with a communication strategy with our new communications coordinator for these things. The job posting for CEO actually went out before the communications coordinator had formally started their position. We've been trying to find candidates since like it's been over a month now. It's been out there. We're really, really trying. It's not like we're doing our best, and the communications coordinator is working on a strategy specifically for these positions that will come out very shortly with a Facebook event and a big push for this. We are trying to get more candidates. It's just that right now we only have 1. So I hear that people don't want to do an interview for just 1 person, but if we're talking about temporarily hiring someone, I'm not sure what that would look like without an interview either.
Cammy?
No,
John?
I was going to say that we have not hired this new person yet, we've not interviewed this new person yet. If you know people that might be a good CEO, encourage them to apply. Your CSU councilors yourself, it's everybody's job to promote the best interest of the union. If you know people that could be a good CEO, encourage them to apply. That's something we can all do in this room. We all know people.
Right. So I'd like to kind of echo what John just said, is that I think we really need to do something. Like, we need a CEO, right? That's something that we do need to call the election, hopefully to get it to have election dates and have an actual election at the end of November, right? So something we might not need to appoint it just now. I think we could try for like a Hail Mary recruiting, like not recruiting, but like Hail Mary push to get people to apply for CEO, because I honestly don't feel comfortable with only 1 candidate and picking only 1 candidate. I think everybody here is not comfortable with that. So push whatever appointments or interviews. Don't book it quite yet, or at the very least, essentially have a deadline that's as late as possible. So when's the next council meetings? In 2 weeks, right?
We can't push it that far. Sorry, like point of information, like for everyone, just like elections have to be called on November 1st if we're going to have them within the prescribed amount of time. We don't have that long.
All right.
So
all right. So essentially, then, some sort of within the next week, at least, I guess next Friday, some sort of something like a special council meeting where we essentially just do the interviews and push people to apply. Literally, if you hand in your CV, the minute before council starts, you can be interviewed. Something along those lines, right? If you show up with your CV to the meeting, we will interview you, because I want one person, at least 2 candidates, please. You know, so that we're not stuck with whoever applies. So at least, I guess, I've just come up with a motion on this. I motion to have applications open until the minute of the next special council meeting to do the interviews.
You can't do a long, like talking a lot and then do a motion. So I have Chris on the speakers list and Sophie, and afterwards if you like, you can, if it doesn't come up within those 2 times, then
sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask Sophie something. It's does the CEO need to be a Concordia student? Because I found in the bylaws that Concordia students are entitled to be able to run for CEO, but I didn't find anything that says you're not allowed as an outsider to run. So I would just like a clarification on that, just so I have an understanding of how limited or open this application is.
it's best practice for them to be a Concordia student. I don't know that it's necessarily limited, but I would say that in the past there were external CEOs who were bought off, so probably having an internal candidate would be better. Like we've had, I don't know, the long history going back to the early 2000s and onward is like, there's some sketchy stuff that happened in elections, y'all. So like, I don't know. Like a Concordia Student Union member is probably like better, but I don't have a direct answer to that because I'm really like not. If it doesn't say explicitly it has to be, then does anyone know?
Can I directly respond? Just that it's
yeah, I guess.
Thank you, Anna. From what I remember from discussions last year, and I don't remember the exact bylaws, but this was an issue that we ran into where essentially it turned out that someone we were looking at was a graduate student and we couldn't hire them as a CEO. I believe it's somewhere specifically listed that the CEO, the DEOs can be graduate students, but the CEO has to be a member of the Concordia Student Union. And the thing that we did with Caitlin this year, last year, where you like provide honorary membership to someone, specifically says that you cannot do that for the CEO. So it's like the CEO is like the chairperson, you can like provide honorary membership and like find loopholes around it, and it's like structured so that that's a thing that we can do. The CEO is specifically structured so that we can't do that, and it has to be a Concordia undergraduate student.
Sophie, you were next on the list.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that no one's saying that like if we have more candidates after today that we won't invite them for an interview. We're just saying at this point in time there is only one candidate for an interview. So that's a thing. That's all I really had to say.
Okay. James?
All right. Yeah. So I motion to allow anyone who between now and the date of the interview hands in their CV before the first interview to be admitted to be interviewed.
So I have information to your motion.
Yeah.
When you say anyone, is it like Concordia students or literally anyone?
All right, let's restrict it to Concordia students. Any Concordia student who submits their CV to the interview at any point before we start doing the first interview will be admitted to the interview process.
So we have a motion on the floor. Someone or the people have put their hands up seconding it. Patrick second. Okay, so we have a new speakers list, new discussion, and it's this question. I can't see you. What's your name?
Sophie.
Sophie.
That's Sophie.
Given that November 1st is next Thursday, like, are we calling a special council meeting within a week? And like, what if we can't reach quorum? Like, then we can hire that CEO.
So let's hope we can reach quorum. Like, yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to make an amendment that rather than it be any Concordia student eligible to run for CEO, so that we don't have a situation where it's someone who's, say, a graduate who wouldn't be eligible to actually win, so that it's a legitimate competition. Because if we have 5 people who are all graduates who all run and none of them can actually get elected, then it kind of...
Okay, so there's an amendment on the table. Does anyone want to second the amendment? Sophie? Okay. Now we have an amendment. Rory? Sophie, you'll be after.
My only issue with this, Jared, is that last year when we had interviews at council, I believe there were members who were grad students, or maybe most of them were grad students. I don't see a problem with having graduate students as our CEO. I think it has them like one level removed, and that's a good thing.
Sophie? So I just read the bylaw in question, and technically by that bylaw, if we're going with the argument that anyone who's entitled, like it entails the right to, it says every undergraduate student registered in a credit course or its equivalent and subject to the student union fee at Concordia University shall be a member of the student union. Membership entails the right to vote in all elections, by-elections, general meetings, and to run and hold elected office in the student union or serving as the chief electoral officer or on the judicial board. If we're saying that in this bylaw that says that like people are entitled to but not necessarily exclusively given the right to, then we're suggesting that anyone could run for any of our positions as well. So I'm
have
not.
Sophie finish her point.
Yeah. So basically, I would kind of say that like by my reading of that, and then going through what the judicial board requirements are, as well as what it says the chief electoral officer are, is like if you're not a member of the union, you don't have the right to hold those positions.
James.
I would have kind of, sure for the amendment, but I would have kind of assumed that eligibility is in like already applied. So if you're applying for the position but you're not eligible, you're disqualified by default. So personally, I don't see a productive reason why it should be there other than just for redundancy. Because if you're not qualified for the position or you're not allowed to hold that position, then well, you're not allowed to hold it by bylaws, and we can't vote you in even if we do an interview, right? But sure, I guess I'll support the amendment for redundancy's sake.
Point of information. Like your motion was a Concordia student, right?
Yeah.
But that includes also grad students.
There's an implication that people also have to be eligible for the position. You know.
Jared?
That's just the reason why I put it up, just to make that implication explicitly clear.
Call the question.
Whoever calls the question, it goes directly to a vote. Basically that means that if there are more votes for going to question, that we just go into the last speaker's list of anyways, whatever. You've done it before, I'm sure. Okay, so all 4 calling to question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Any against? Okay. Oh, but there's no abstentions on calling to question. It's just yes or no. Do you want to answer the question?
Just the last question about your
proposal. Called to question.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, 10 people? We're 10 people. Yeah, we're 11 people total right now. Counselors. Okay, so we've called to question, and so we'll go straight into the vote of your amendment, basically. And can someone remind the room of like what that amendment is? And do you have it written down?
Yeah, amendment to motion that it not be any Concordia student, but an eligible undergraduate Concordia student.
Okay, cool. So all for approving this amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And abstentions? 1 abstention, so 9. 2 abstentions, sorry. Couldn't see. Okay, so that amendment has been approved, and now we're back to, I guess, the amendment in full, or the motion in full, rather. Which is...
Minutes of redactions. Can you read the motion in full?
Oh, sorry. Motion to allow... sorry. Motion to allow any undergraduate Concordia student to apply and be allowed to the interview until the day of.
With the amendment.
Oh, wait, okay, so let me re-say it. So the initial motion was a motion to allow anyone to apply and be allowed to the interview until the day of for CEO. Amendment was amendment to motion that is not to be any Concordia student but an eligible undergraduate Concordia student.
Okay, so that any undergraduate student can apply until the day of the interview. Okay. So we're back on the original question. Is there any more discussion on this?
Discussion. I mean, I don't know if this is a bit of things, but it's not till the day of. It's till the moment before the first interview. Right. So before the first interview, if they hand in the CV, they'll get in. Right.
Any more discussion on this? Okay, so we're gonna go into a vote. So all for the following motion, can you please raise your hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Against? And abstentions? 1, 2, 3. 3 abstentions. Cool. So we're back to the point of just by-elections in general. Is there anything left to be said about by-elections?
Just for a point of information though, for Sophie though, by-elections, when do we have to resign again? When do we have to resign for the people to run?
When we call the elections, we call all the eligible seats. So if a counselor in the room currently would not be able to do the winter semester of their mandate, now would be the time to resign, as once we have
which date?
Today or
by council, next council.
By the special council, because once we have the CEO, the election dates and the seats have to be posted. So if a person in this room is not going to be here in the winter and needs to resign, the time to do so is imminently.
Is there any more discussion on by-elections? Awesome. We can go to the next point, which is our turn, student consent culture.
Okay, I'll start with the motion, then we'll talk about it. That's okay?
So the motion is, be it therefore resolved that the $25,000 allocation to our turn that was approved by CSU Council in May 2018 be reallocated to students for consent culture. Okay, so preface, this is something I meant to but forgot to put on the agenda when I sent it out last Friday, so if people want to take more time and put it to another meeting, there's no urgency at all behind this. Just something I thought of. So like, if people want more time to talk about it, not at all a problem, okay? Basically the issue in question is this. Back in May this year, the CSU Council had a presentation from Caitlin Salvino from an organization called Our Turn, which has been a national coalition of groups on different campuses across the country, from BC to Nova Scotia, working on issues of consent and fighting sexual violence on campuses. They did some really important research work, creating a sort of framework for analyzing how good a university's sets of policies are around combating sexual violence on campus, and that's been used as a framework for students to do activism all across the country. And so this framework has been used successfully to really reform some schools, specifically in Dalhousie, where so they made some big changes that were considered positive by the organizations. It's an organization that the CSU, based on the work that this organization had done, decided that they wanted to make an investment in that group, compensate them for their work, and encourage them to keep going forward. Fast forward a bit from that May meeting, you get to roughly the end of August, early September, around orientation week time. I get a call in my office from our Turn National asking, hey, when are you going to send us the money? I guess the previous CSU executives had forgot to do that. So I went, oh, okay, and processed the check, got it ready to send. Then a couple minutes later, I get an email from our Turn National that says that they had just incorporated and that they were restructuring their board and thanked their old board members for their service. And about an hour or 2 hours after that, I get a call from someone that was very involved in our Turn saying, hey, we just got fired by surprise. And apparently, after some conversation with this person, I was trying to figure out more that two members of what was the our Turn board before incorporation basically made a unilateral move to incorporate the organization on their own and excluded all of the old board members. It's a very strange situation. And so all of the others that were still working on various projects, our Turn research, outreach, all that stuff, found themselves locked out of social media accounts, locked out of email accounts, lost the research they were working on because it was contained in some of these files, and wondering what's going on, what you're supposed to do with this. And it led to some back and forth with this group of people that was doing most of the work at our Turn, figuring out what are we going to do. This work is very important, we want to keep it going forward, but someone just created an organization with that name, because of a person who was the board chair, their friend, and then they got to meet the minimum 3 people in order to legally incorporate. They got their mother to be on the board as well. The mother happens to be a corporate lawyer. And then one of her employees in that same law firm is the one that sent the notice to the other our Turn board members saying, your service is no longer needed, thank you, bye-bye. Fast forward a little bit from there. So that was around orientation week time. Fast forward a bit. The our Turn board members and workers and all those things decided to reconstitute, create a new organization, continue their work. So they're currently working on various research reports that are due out soon. And they decided that we're going to keep doing the work that they thought was important under a new name, which they called Students for Consent Culture. So they sent me an email asking that because we did not at this point send the $25,000 to our Turn because I had concerns about what was going on. If we send that money to them, will we actually get anything returned for that money we spent? Will it actually lead to producing research? Will it actually lead to outreach? Will it actually lead to building ties between university campuses and student unions? I wasn't sure about that, so I held the check. It's signed, signing orders have been approved of it. I chose not to mail it until I got more clarity. And based on what I've seen, since even that time, one of the 2 people that had created this official our Turn organization has since left the board. So now just the former president and their mother basically constitute this organization. So I'm inclined to agree with this person from the Students for Consent Culture group, saying that we decided that we do want national organization and research around combating sexual assault on campus that has a proven track record of getting results. And we want to use our money in ways that will actually return results. We should be giving it to the people that were doing this work, Students for Consent Culture, instead of giving it to this bizarre, undemocratic person. So that's why I'm proposing that we reallocate that $25,000. It's basically the same people that were in our Turn, it's just they're under a new name now. Now that said, this was just brought up now, so people want a bit more time to think about it. I can send out some documents. That's totally cool. This is not an urgent thing, but that is what is in front of us.
James?
Yeah. So, just to be
kind of clear on the subject, I really don't feel comfortable in allocating something like $25,000 of funds, or even the old $25,000 that wasn't spent, without having any documentation to council before we do that, right? Because it's not an insubstantial sum of money, and you know, I haven't heard of all this drama that went on in this group, and so I really want to see something more substantive, especially if we're dealing with that amount of cash. So that's so at least, you know, if maybe have the guys come here, do a presentation or something, and then just allocate, if we're going to allocate money at all, do it on the basis of not because we promised you before, but as a new group on council, and just cancel the old check.
Sophie?
To be clear, there is a binding corporate resolution that granted this money to our turn from the last mandate that we're all still bound to. Rory was actually the one who allocated the funds. So the issue now is that, as John said, if council wants more time to think about this, if council wants more documentation, we're more than willing to give that. But the issue now is we just need to make sure that these people who essentially did all the hard work that got them the money granted in the first place don't end up out in the cold and have a bigger conversation about it.
Emily?
Yeah, I'm just kind of echoing what Sophie says. When it was allocated, they had like, there were a presentation, there were documentation, like the person that was, I think it was the president at the time, or like one of the co-founder, came and like talked about this. Now it's this situation, as Sophie was saying, where it's just weird what's happening in our turn. So this is what we wanted to talk about.
Rory?
Yeah, we spent a long time when I was a councillor last mandate talking about this. We went through the justification, the justification for the exact amount of money that they were asking for. And given the documents that they presented at that point, I had motions to increase the money to the $25,000 that we gave them because of the justification that they gave. I'm inclined to agree that like we should still be honoring that. My only reservation is that perhaps we should revisit it in the sense that if their organization's gone through such turmoil, their budgetary needs may have also changed, either for more or for less. So it could be that now if they only have 2 board members, or they're looking at legal fees, or like establishment type fees, that may affect the budget that they came and asked us for, and it may affect the amount of money that we'd be inclined to give them. So I'm comfortable voting on this motion as it stands today to reallocate, but I think it would also be a good idea for it to come up later. Maybe we invite them back if they're in town. I thought maybe they're from Vancouver, but if they're in town, and then that way we can just update if like they need more or they need less, or etc.
Sure.
Oh, is there anyone else on the speakers list?
Nope.
I was going to move to call the question. Oh, is there not a motion on there?
The motion is on there. There's a motion.
Yeah.
But you're the last person. You can call the question.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. I thought there were more people, to be honest.
No, it's okay. Okay, so all those in favor of calling to question on this discussion? 1, 2, 3, 7. Against? Okay, and so now we go to your motion. Can you just repeat the motion?
The motion was, be it therefore resolved that the $25,000 grant that was approved by CSU Council in May 2018 be rescinded, and the $25,000 be reallocated to students for consent culture.
Okay, all those in favor of this motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Against? 1. And I'm getting there, jeez. Abstentions? 1. Pardon?
Oh, no. You're counting those who are against, right?
Against,
yeah. No.
Abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 abstentions.
Point of order. I'm so sorry, but but I think with the way that this motion is worded, we need to have this passed with 2/3. Because if we're unapproving giving money to X and then approving giving money to Y, we're in effect nullifying the motion from last mandate. If we're going back on a motion, we need 2/3 to overrule it.
We have 1 against and 5 for.
Okay, so
Abstentions, take away your vote.
is just so that we can mark it down then in the minutes, passed with 2/3 for propriety's sake.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question, but I would like to know if this, we could discuss also this point in maybe like the next council meeting, or is this just, yeah?
It's too late now.
We can, sorry, can I be put on the phone? Yeah, so we can absolutely bring this to have a bigger discussion about it. As Rory said, there might be more financial needs, and so we can prepare for maybe a presentation from the people involved in this group to give more information, so don't worry.
That's what I meant.
Sophie.
I would like to call a recess.
Do you have an idea for how long you want to go for?
Like 10 minutes? 15. Okay, 15.
Anyone want a second 15-minute recess? Tammy? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Against? 1. Abstentions. Okay, 15-minute recess, so we're back at 9:32. So I was just informed that Paige sent in her her excuses a little bit late. This is out of like how things would usually be done, but I know that Caitlin gives like exceptions for this kind of thing sometimes. So if anyone were to put a motion to excuse Paige, I would entertain that. Demi?
I would like to put it, but amend it with Princess as well, that had to leave because she was sick.
Okay. Does anyone want a second excusing Paige and Princess? Sophie? Seconding. Okay. Any discussion surrounding that? Nope. Okay, so we'll move straight to a vote. So all in favor of excusing Paige and Princess? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 for. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, so 10 for. All right. So I'm going to assume our turn. Like no one never said like, okay, everything is all done for that point. But I'm going to assume that that is over unless someone has anything to add to it. Nope. Okay. So the next point would be the finance report, which was pulled from consent. So Rory, I believe this was you.
Yeah, I just had questions on some of these reports that I've pulled. Once again, sorry for those who hate hearing my voice. There's 3 reports that I've pulled. The FinCom one, I just wanted to ask, because it was the FinCom meeting that I wasn't at. I don't want to make it a huge discussion point, but 2 executives like sold each other phones and then like bought a new phone, etc. I read about that and I'm just thinking it was part of the hardware allocation. I want to know how that conversation transpired like within the team, because I understand friends like selling each other an old phone or whatever, and then the other friend sort of buying it, but using their hardware allocation to pay one executive, and then the other executive using a hardware allocation to buy something new. It just didn't feel right on a governance standpoint for me. Maybe John can provide some context.
Sophie,
Or Sophie.
It's about the team. So basically, I don't know if people are familiar with just how much communication is required for the CSU executives to do, but one of the executives early in the summer, like, is this okay if I
can.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's necessary that I have a functioning phone. You'll also notice this is not the most updated version of the iPhone, but my phone was no longer. It was barely working, but most importantly, like it was never able to do the basic things that I need it to do for this job. It was a smartphone by the very bare minimum definition, and
the screen was smashed.
The screen smashed, and I purchased Michaela's old phone. It was more affordable. It's better. It's more sustainable than purchasing a brand new phone, and her phone still works fine. And so that is why it was purchased. It wasn't so that Michaela could make money. It was just so that it was more affordable and more sustainable. I don't need all the bells and whistles. I just need something I can do my job with.
Right?
Yeah, I didn't want to make this a big issue. It's not that I see it as necessarily a problem. I totally get that executives need phones. And as I've mentioned in Finance Committee before, like I think we should just be providing executives with the hardware that they need, period, as part of the corporation's sort of assets. It's just that two people working together, then sort of selling things between each other that's financed by the organization. It's like it sounds like it's so small, but based on what had happened last year and some of the conflicts of interest that arose between that team, I just think in the efforts of transparency, that type of transaction, like, I know it's a small thing, you buy a phone from your friend, but when it's between executives and the money's coming from the CSU, I just think it should be more transparent. Like, it should just be notified to council, or it should be written explicitly, or like I shouldn't have to pull it from the report. I know it's a small thing.
Michaela?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what's not transparent about it because we followed the guidelines of the policy. What basically happened was that we were not informed that this hardware budget was on freeze. Everything happened before that, and we asked many times for Finance Committee to meet on this point, and it wasn't until a week ago that this happened. So, for example, so Michelle bought the phone off me, I bought a new phone. It was actually a used phone, or previously used phone, and like I couldn't even return it because it had already passed, and because it was a used phone, I wouldn't get even all of the, like, everything is explained in the finance documents. We submitted a proposal, we explained the situation very clearly, I think. We followed all of the avenues that were asked of us. This is regular procedure throughout past executive years as well. So I'm not sure what's not being transparent about this. We can gladly talk about it, but it seems a little bit unnecessary because it is a budget that happened, and we asked Finance Committee for this exception, even though the policy hasn't changed. You know, we were just not informed of it, and the policy still hasn't changed for many months since it's been frozen. We explained the situation, and Finance Committee approved it, and it's also in the finance documents for council to read, which councilors are supposed to read all of the documents. So I'm not really sure what's not transparent about it. There's no conflict of interest here. It's not last year. I'm just kind of surprised it's about transparency because we've not been hiding this at all. We've asked specifically to talk about this for finance for many, many months now. Many months, yeah.
Michelle?
Yeah, same in the interest of transparency. The receipt that was written up was clearly that it was purchased off of Michaela. In the interest of transparency, I only spent $100 on this, so I feel like this shouldn't be an issue for council. I've saved council money, and so, yeah, just to be transparent, it was $100.
Which you would know if you read the documents. Sorry.
Margot? John?
Yeah, just to clarify for folks, none of these expenditures were approved before Finance Committee saw them and was asked what they want to do with it. So it's not like I just signed it off in my office. They just told, hey, Finance Committee, I did this thing. Like, this was brought to Finance Committee asking for direction whether or not to approve these expenditures or not. With regards to my own process and telling them whether or not they should even have not applied for the reimbursement under the policy, which obviously I ran it past the accountant and the general manager saying, is this kosher, is this normal? They didn't see any objections. Maybe they're wrong, but like that's just what I was told. So my thought process was no red flags were raised by anybody around me with this kind of training, and $100 for a used phone is cheaper than $400 for a new phone, so it just seemed like a sensible thing to propose.
All right, Rory?
I just want to iterate here. I didn't mean to bring this up as a contentious point. It's not about the cost. It's not about whether it was $100 or not. I agree it's cheap. I agree it's great. It's not about the hardware allocation justification itself. I believe that executives should be getting devices. should be supported in that sense. And neither am I saying it's a transparency issue like anyone tried to hide it. I appreciate that it was asked of and sent to Finance Committee itself, but I just wanted to raise this as an issue. Like this situation isn't an issue, but when you have executives working together that are selling each other things, if the money was their own, it's different from when the money belongs to the corporation. In this situation, it's fine. It's a $100 phone. It's not a big deal. And I don't mean to imply that anyone this year is like anything that happened last year. It's just that when that happens, when that type of interaction happens between people with corporate money, I just want to dissuade that. I just really want to dissuade that.
Sophie? Yeah, just that, like, it wasn't like Michelle or Michaela went to the CSU bank account, took out cash from the CSU without approval, and then let y'all know later. What happened was a transaction occurred that was directly related to the needs of an executive requiring new hardware to do the basic capacities of their job, which was during the planning of orientation. So having a student life coordinator without a phone is a pretty big issue.
We paid with our own money.
They paid with their own money out of pocket and were reimbursed months later. Last week. This, like, I understand the concern about money passing through hands of executives and that concern, but for someone, like for a counselor to bring an issue that's not intended to be contentious, this is a very good point, but I don't think that anything that happened between the executives in this point was against any of the existing policies. And it wasn't like they took a CSU credit card to do these transactions and didn't tell anyone and didn't provide any receipts, and it wasn't like, for example, in a hypothetical situation, they connected the CSU credit card to their personal Uber account. So what happened was they were now reimbursed last week for something that happened months ago. That's, you know, it's not contentious. I understand the concern. I don't think the concern applies to the situation. James?
Yeah, so I think it's clear to me that people are kind of talking over each other's heads and that nobody really has an issue with the financial statements. So I'm just going to motion to approve the financial committee's minutes.
Is there anyone who will second that? Kemi? Okay, new speakers list on approving it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all in favor of approving the FinCom minutes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Against? Abstentions? Cool, so they are approved. Alright. So I guess with that, we can move on to the policy committee minutes that were pulled. They're committee minutes, right? Mm-hmm. And that was you as well, right?
Great. Can I move to approve the policy committee minutes first?
Will anyone second that? Patrick?
And then can I motivate and sort of discuss? Yeah, just to get something on the table first. So I just wanted to pull these to bring it back up to council's attention. It's something that we've seen before. I think it's important to have Michaela explain this just sort of so we know what's going on. But I wanted to raise it to everyone's attention that once again, we have judicial board members that are being attacked, like quote for quote, attacked outside of JB. They're being harassed or targeted by Concordia students. And these are people that are volunteering their time to do work for us. So if we as an organization can't protect our JB members when they're doing their jobs, like we have an obligation to. So it's not that we're not doing anything, and I'd like Michaela to maybe explain a little bit just so council can be aware, but I wanted to raise this, and this is why I pulled the report, so that we all are sort of reminded that we had JB members that were harassed, and we need to find a solution to it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so I can
go for it.
Okay. So just to give some context and, or I guess reminders, so the last Council of Representatives got this report at the last meeting in May. And so it came again, I can't remember the exact council meeting, but we have seen this report already. So people should have seen it. From what I know now, this is not currently happening at this moment where they're being harassed. This happened in the last election. But it is very, very important that we deal with it, and so that's basically what's happening right now. The last policy meeting, we thoroughly discussed this, and if you haven't read the policy minutes, I highly encourage you to do so because it's quite detailed of what we've recommended. And we're also meeting on Friday to kind of officially approve these recommendations and act on them. I'm in the process of doing that already myself. So just to like quickly summarize, I guess, that the issue is that JB needs to be independent as possible. However, they're so independent that there's really not enough communication happening, and proper training's not being done. Like logistical information that should be very straightforward is not being shared. And so with this lack of communication, we really need a point person to have institutional knowledge and to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen, where basic information's not being shared, training's not happening, and this point person would have the deadlines to ensure that JB has the right resources and the right knowledge to perform their duties as best to their capacity. So the general manager has agreed to this, and we're going to be in discussion with the general manager about what this could look like and making sure that there's boundaries, because they cannot have an advisory role. It would have to be purely informative. And this is actually better because then they would go directly to the general manager, who's in their contract has to be apolitical and neutral. So it wouldn't be going to any executive, which is really great. And the general manager can inform the executive of what's going on when that needs to happen. And so that'll help with some of it. There needs to be a lot of clarifications of when you should be doing a complaint, what the JB's authority is on the website, so that when people are filing complaints, they have to know that like why you would file a complaint, how to do that, and also that JB is the last resort. You don't go right to JB. You have to go through other avenues to make sure that those issues can't be resolved in other ways. And of course, emotional well-being is really, really important in the safety of Judicial Board. So I think with clarifying how their complaints work in order for them to be done properly, so people are not frustrated, they don't harass them, I think that could majorly contribute. And also having a policy where basically if there is harassment, if there is bullying or something happening, that those complaints will not be looked at. They could be maybe not prioritized, or they could not be looked at all until there's maybe a resolution that happens, or they apologize, or something's in place. But if that kind of behavior is happening, the complaint will just not be looked at for the time being until that issue is resolved, because we should not be promoting that kind of behavior in order to move things forward. That's not okay. So a code of conduct would be a really great way to help this process and make sure that this doesn't continue to happen again. There's other points, you can look into it, but I'm in the process of working on it, and there'll be more updates because policy meeting on Friday. So the next council meeting, I can make an informational point to say exactly where we are and how far we're along with helping this issue. On the other hand, we also can't do things for JB, so some of those things have to be recommendations for them to take up for themselves, because we can't write their policies for them.
Any more points on the yes, James?
A motion to approve the minutes.
Sorry, the motion's already been
call the question. Then I call the question.
Okay.
Motion to call.
I mean, there's no speakers list. It's
Okay.
not a necessary
All right.
thing to do.
Fair enough. Let's just vote.
So if there's no more points on this, all those who approve of the policy committee minutes. 10 against, and abstentions. So 10 people approve. The next point is the chairperson's report, which was also your poll point, right?
Okay, once again, I'm sorry. This is just a very quick question because the chair isn't here, so I'm going to direct it to Sophie. At the end of the chairperson's report, they say that a general member of the union, so a student, came forward with a complaint about regular council, so the meetings or whatever, and that it was forwarded to you. Just for council's awareness, I'm curious what the complaint about RCMs was.
Cool. Also, full disclosure, like, the complaint was specifically about racial diversity on council committees, so I forwarded it to the 2 co-chairs of BIPOC committee because I'm not really the face of diversity on council or the executive, to be fair. So, like, the other thing to note is that it is a complaint allegedly from a general member. No one is on the student list with that name or email. So if it is a complaint from a general member, they wish to remain anonymous, and so it will be handled with Princess and Akira, and it'll probably come up in an executive report once the investigation has completed. But we agreed to meet with the member because their concern was valid and noted.
It's in consent.
We do, because there's some resignations and things in there. We do need to approve it, sorry. Seconded.
Moves to approve, seconded by Rory. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Against? And abstentions. Great. Okay, so all the reports have been approved now. And we're going into consent training completion. The point that you wanted still public.
I think that point is the. Sorry guys, I'm like minute keeping like.
It was for moved by
It's not like coordinate.
Yeah, because now I'm not prepared to do this kind of thing.
We're on your point, basically.
Okay, so basically, I know that what I'm about to say might be able to hurt a few people in the room. I have been harassed and bullied as a counsel, not as a counsel, but as a student, by a club by one member of a club who is on this kind of club. So basically it has happened almost for a year, and the last 4 weeks has not been really good at all, and it become worse right now. And so I brought to the executive, and it's still not able to solve, and right now CSU decided not to be able to take this because it seems like they feel like it's a interpersonal issue, and some of the executives decide not to be able to take this. What I'm not sure about right now is that if CSU cannot really protect the council protect the people on council right now, how would students at large trust us, whoever is on council right now? There's only 2 funds right now, and this is a big issue with fund 2. And like, I'm becoming the first fund person who right now being bullied on campus, and I'm really surprised that we cannot get anything resolved from the CSU, basically because it is interpersonal, and now it seems like this issue has to be transferred outside of school in order to get it to be resolved. So yeah, I just wondered if anyone can take a question, that'd be great.
Michelle? So we've spoken with this counselor several times. Unfortunately, like, we sympathize. It's a problem that happens to students. Unfortunately, it's not within our responsibility as an executive to be resolving conflicts with students. We have the advocacy center that does fantastic work, and a lot of issues with students need to be taken to the Office of Rights and Responsibilities. We felt it was incredibly inappropriate for us to be bringing 2 students into our offices to try to resolve conflict. That is not what we are here for, and whether the student is a counselor or not, it's not an issue from council. Princess has spent a lot of her time speaking to the club in question and has done her best, but at a certain point, there's nothing that the executive can do. We have a lot on our hands.
I'm just gonna, there's a speakers list and you're on it, so we'll.
Yeah, we have a lot on our hands on the day-to-day, so we can't mitigate conflict between students, unfortunately. But we've really done our best. We've heard the counselor out. We've offered through the club to have some sort of mediation. Princess has spent a lot of her very minimal amount of free time trying to handle the situation. We've really done the best we can, and it's unfortunate, but it's not really within the executive's roles to be managing these kinds of issues.
Rory?
I'm just, I guess, I don't understand the situation either. But as a counselor sitting here when this issue's been brought up or been expressed, some of the questions that come to mind are, and it's hard because the coordinator actually isn't here, but what